Hi Ben, how are you? It's been a while. Just last week, in fact, we were speaking about certain challenges in the past, like 10 years ago, just exchanging war stories. And you had some interesting insights that I really, really wanted to record. And here's my opportunity. So thank you for, uh, as being so generous with your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure, sir. I look forward to it.
All
I
right,
really
okay.
have. Yeah.
For the benefit of everyone here that's watching, can you just introduce yourself, just very briefly, and
Yeah, absolutely.
how?
Yeah, my name is Ben Boyce. I'm a sales engineer here at Quest Software. I support our uh, performance monitoring solutions within our ISM business unit. I've been doing sales engineering now for probably 16 years. And prior to having the revelation that I prefer people more than I prefer things, I spent about 12 years in IT, with most of it in a software development and testing capacity.
Very good, very good. Uh, you prefer our people. 16 years, that's a long time. And just for the benefit of everyone, sales engineering, that's where you speak to customers about their challenges, demonstrate some empathy, and kind of go, I feel your pain, there's nothing I can do. Or are you really in the weeds trying to help them out as much as possible?
Well, we're always trying to help out as much as possible. I fundamentally think of my job as a builder of bridges. On the one hand, I have what my salespeople are having to sell, right? And on the other end, we have our prospects and our customers that are having problems and are looking for solutions. And my job is to build that bridge between the two of them.
Okay, okay. And you're more customer friendly. I know you are.
I, I'm a dork that knows how to talk to people.
Okay. Well, we spoke about a couple of things last week, and it started life with how you're seeing things change with the customers you're speaking to. Can we just start there briefly, and just for the benefit of everyone, what did you mean? What were we talking about?
It really, I think, is about the roles and responsibilities of the audience members in a lot of my conversations. Traditionally, when I was talking to an audience, the vast majority of them were comprised of people that had the role of database administrator. And what I'm seeing and more of are people with different job titles that are joining the meetings, or different roles and responsibilities is really a better description. People that might be responsible for putting together cloud projects. It could be data engineers, software developers. It's really interesting. It's like, okay, you guys are involved in this particular process now. Not traditionally the audience that I had for most of my solutions, but you know
And are they reluctant? Are they reluctant to join, or what's the dynamic?
it's
I
it,
I
it
I can be frank here. You can be frank.
I've had, well, it's a bit of both, actually. I have some folks that have said, "Oh, is that, what are you hoping to understand? What's got you in this meeting?" And I've had people say flat out, "My manager told me to attend." So the folks, yeah, and generally I don't get a lot of interaction with those folks. So, but the folks that are kind of forthcoming with why they're here are really their organizations have adopted a methodology of wanting to really kind of bring down traditional silos within their organization and have relevant players that are really involved in some aspect or all aspects, depending on the position, of that software development lifecycle. And I think it's really about getting that visibility into the areas that person has the domain knowledge. Right, so yeah, I might be the SQL, rather the developer that wrote the SQL statements that are executing in the application behind the scenes. Well, I kind of need to be involved and know if what I'm writing is efficient. Is it working well? First of all, does it do what it's supposed to do? Right. Secondly, does it perform well?
That absolutely makes sense to me. Why hasn't that happened before?
The reality is there's still always going to be those systems that aren't considered critical, but are utilized throughout a software development life cycle, right? And so what I think I'm starting to see now is a shift in organizations that are starting to realize, well, yes, performance in particular is critically important, right? Well, when do you want to know that you've got a performance problem, right? What's the risk associated with it? And those risks vary widely depending on the organizations, right? It's more, it's more than just up, down, is it on, is it off, does it work, does it not work? If it's someone, my main source of revenue obviously is, let's say it's a website, right? And my users can't click and complete a transaction in 5 seconds or whatever their threshold is for discomfort, right? That's lost opportunity. That's not necessarily that the solution's not working, right, or the website's not working. It's just taking too long. So I'm going to go somewhere else, and maybe I can complete that transaction somewhere else, and maybe I paid a little more for it. So, gosh, not only did you lose that particular opportunity, but maybe you could have made a little more money in raising your prices on the product. That's not what I'm suggesting, of course, but it's lost opportunity costs, right?
Yeah. And I've done it myself where I'm buying something, I stop the process because I get stuck spinning wheels, and I might
Yes.
drop it actually, and I come back the next week and I Google search and I got back onto the same site. I was like, no, I had a bad experience there. I'm just not going to go there. I'm going to go continuing on my research.
Yeah.
I've done that, so
Oh,
and
for sure.
that would be a common thing.
Yeah. And what
On
if
that
this was
particular
a...
point,
Yes, sir.
yeah, no, on that particular point, about dev, non-prod versus prod, and money and stuff.
Yes.
The argument, I know I can appreciate what you're saying there, and for me, the main argument is coming back to the essence of DevOps is automation, reducing waste. So if you're sending in code that can be optimized, and you're reducing those cycles of over and back between operations and development, you're reducing waste. And that for me is if you can set up your monitoring system on your non-prod systems and have the entire workflow in sync, then absolutely makes sense to me.
Yes, I don't disagree. And it's interesting because I do like the terminology used, prod versus non-prod, because dev test, I think, is an aspect of non-prod. But the reality is that these organizations that are interested in reducing waste, ensuring their solutions are highly performant, they're dedicating efforts and resources into building out non-prod systems that are handling these workloads, but that can be continuously monitored and ensure that, okay, yep, we caught it before it hit production, right? So now it's less expensive for us to go ahead and make those changes, make those improvements, to avoid those pitfalls that you see later down the chain, right, or later down in the process.
No, but it's like if the risk is, and this is the challenge I have about risk. Risk is quantified. Where I think the conversation should be a bit is ambiguities. Ambiguities, they're not defined. You take a risk, it's quantified, it's known, you take the risk. Ambiguities could be 500,000. I don't know the impact of this. And then if it's something like, gosh, well, the mitigation here is 10,000, of course I'm going to invest in 10,000. But I don't think people have made this jump yet, and this is why I thought this was interesting to have this conversation, is you're starting to slowly see developers coming into the conversation around operations, monitoring, diagnosis, reducing the waste going into production, and you're starting to have that conversation. It's not a giant leap to do what they're currently doing in operations, shift left, and bring them into non-production environments. And I think that's where that hasn't happened yet. And it's going to be a big mistake for people before they realize we should have done that. And that's where I think I'm really keen on is for people to be aware of that. Shift left,
Absolutely.
you're going to have a massive impact downstream on performance, but also those ambiguities that you just can't quite quantify.
That's right. You might not even know there is a problem because you didn't bother to look.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're probably going through some traumatic recall right now with your data misdemeanor.
Yeah.
But I think that's a perfect analogy.
I didn't know that would be that varied and that problematic.
Yeah. Well, again, you
I
didn't
found out the
know,
hard
and it
way.
was, yeah, 100%.
I think a lot of it stems from the organizations themselves. Traditionally, departments have been very, very siloed, right? I've got my budget. I've got to do my stuff. This is my job, right? That other department, well, that's their stuff. And I even had those conversations. I said, well, what happens in this situation? They go, we just call the guy that wrote it and they'll deal with it, right? But now I think what a lot of these organizations are starting to realize there's a big benefit in having these domain experts, these very, very talented and intelligent people actually talking to each other and coming together to really build a quality product, whatever it is for that particular organization.
Now, I'm sorry, but you're describing DevOps there, and
The
everyone
dreaded
knows the
DevOps.
benefits of DevOps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Surely people aren't just discovering this. Surely.
No, absolutely
Do you think
not.
it's extra? Do you think it's extra pressure from budgets, resources, and it feels like it's more kind of like we have to do this. We just don't have the resources or time. We have to be far more collaborative, and even if it's in person talking, like it doesn't need to be tools orientated.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, people and process is a big factor in any DevOps operation, right? And
This is my ignorance. I'm assuming everyone's already doing DevOps. Is that not the case? Like,
I,
are still people doing manual processes, or is
I
it
oh,
limited to
absolutely.
mission critical systems?
Yeah, I think the folks that are have already identified the negative consequences of them not improving processes are the ones that are probably still doing a lot of that manual effort, right? They just haven't experienced the pain yet, one way or the other. And I'm of the opinion. I mean, when do you want to know there's a problem? you know, I want to know as soon as possible because generally speaking, it's easier and less expensive for us to react to that problem early on than it is later. What if I didn't discover this until very late in the application's development? And what if it was a huge design flaw and that was a central component to the application? Well, you just lost 6 months or however much time. What does that cost you as an organization? What does that cost you as a person? Have you been working 12
Yeah,
hour days for 6 months to try to get this out?
right. 18-hour days, 2 hours sleep a night, 3 days in a row.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, that goes back to the concept of shifting left, reducing, or yeah, I mean, testing further and further left.
Right.
And we spoke about it before about as you go downstream, it's going to have the impact's going to be much higher. Carnegie Mellon's curve. Um,
And I've got some thoughts on that. In especially as it applies to continuous monitoring. There's a lot of thought that goes into that. Your organization may not need pure end-to-end monitoring, right? Because maybe we don't care what the end users think. That's a poor example. Of course we care what the end users think, right? But I've got an internal system that we use for scheduling our calendars, right? Compare that to something going wrong with that. Compare that to, let's say, our website where people are downloading trials. If they can't do that, they're very interested. The opportunity cost for us is much greater than me having a scheduling conflict, right? And so when you think about an application, it's important to understand your user base. the impacts of potential problems to it, and what do we really need to take a look at? You know, if it's a heavy OLTP system, then maybe I'm really just concerned about how the database is actually performing, right? So that's what I'm going to focus on. Right? And then
That's fair.
depending on the complexity of the application, who's involved, you know, maybe I start to broaden that perspective, that observability. Well, maybe it's not happening over here in the database. Maybe it's something at the application layer. You know, maybe it's further up the chain. Maybe we've got, you know, bad ports on a network switch that's, you know, contributing to problems in the organization. So I'm of the opinion, if I don't know about it, I can't fix it. So what do you want to know about? And that's really, I think, harkens back to the importance of people and processes and establishing that understanding of the application, the impacts, its usage, and then deciding on, okay, what is it that we want to improve?
Okay, so the measure of cost, right? So costs could be budget, time, performance. What's
That's
the
right.
cost? What's
Performance.
important? Okay.
What was the cost of me, you know, potentially getting into an accident after, you know, 2 hours of sleep and 48 for a project that went sideways, you know, in me being the only tester in the organization. So
Yeah. I mean,
let alone the
yeah, that's
bodily injury concerns that I would have as a process.
yeah. I mean, the project then though, the project, you know, off a cliff.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Where's Ben?
Yeah,
Hospital.
yeah, yeah. Did he get hit by a bus? Genuinely, did he? What are the biggest challenges that you have, or that you've seen customers do, and you're like, man, stop doing that, please. You're going to cause massive problems.
I I would say, and it's really probably more people in process. It is the finger pointing that I'll see sometimes, right? It's like, oh, well, that's not performing well. That's Bob's job to fix, right? It's organizations, I think, that are still believing that the silos that they're operating in really shouldn't be undone. And that's an organizational challenge, I would say, more than anything.
Okay. So, I mean, they say that about DevOps. It
Yeah,
really is a cultural shift, right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, one of my first experiences with that was at a customer location. They were developing some agile methodologies, and they had chose to implement a paired programming dynamic, which, was kind of early on in a maturity model, I would say. But at least you've got a second set of eyes on kind of what's doing their unit test driven development, and they were doing it in pairs. But to me, that's a very simple example of how you could break down a silo. You don't have two people that are just nope, no, I'm just doing my piece of it. No, my engine doesn't do that. It's important to remove those barriers because all these pieces fit together, right? And it used to bother me. I'd get pulled into design meetings after the fact. So here I am, the tester. I'm
Oh,
like,
oh,
does that really make sense? I don't know here, gang. Think about pulling other interested parties, and this maybe still is a silo thing, but getting the right people involved early on, I
early.
think is
Yeah.
also very very critical. Yeah,
Yeah.
early,
Super
early,
important.
early, right?
Super important. Yeah.
It's like
What advice?
a health checkup.
Just very quickly, last question for me is: what advice would you give
Oh, yeah.
organizations that just haven't made the leap because they don't have to, they don't need to? What would you say to them?
I would say, how comfortable are you with the unknown? And if you don't think it's going to be a problem because it's never happened, And maybe that's sufficient. I mean, these people know their organizations and their business, better than I do, coming in from the outside, obviously. But if what you pay attention to is what gets addressed, and I think if you think about it from a very, very small perspective, because smaller changes are easier to make. It's a core principle in DevOps, isn't it? Right? Shorten those delivery windows into 2 week. What are they called?
Sprints, yeah.
Sprints, I think they are, right? Yeah, or whatever that time frame is. But that time frame, is probably a moving target there as well. Um, Begin thinking about what you don't know, right? And maybe do some disaster planning scenario, right? What happens if this application goes down? Right? Like if it just shuts down, what's the impact to the business?
Yeah, yeah,
And obviously, the
100%.
ones that are potentially more impactful are going to get addressed. Okay, we'll start there. Okay, what small thing could you do to improve upon that scenario? And you don't have to make big changes, I would say. And in fact, I would discourage anyone from making very big changes. Start small because it's easier to adjust, right? Use that sort of principle in DevOps of those shorter sprints, fewer functions and features that are going out in there to mitigate risk. The same applies to thinking about this, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And the last thing you need is a whole host of functions and features going out. And then when something does happen, trying to identify and isolate the issue, right? I think
Trying to
very wise
unpack
the
it
words.
exactly.
And for
Well,
me,
this
that
changed, this changed, this
yeah,
changed.
yeah, right, yeah, yeah. And then on the what you said about the disaster recovery, 100%, and that can be paper based. You can be on a whiteboard, paper based. You'd be surprised with what's going to come up. And I've seen that a few times. Just start with the
It
paper-based
could be a
disaster
great,
recovery.
it could be a great meeting. Get the people that are involved in that application, and not only the people that are developing it, but the people that are managing those projects, or even the folks that have said, yeah, this is something that we really need as an organization. Um, and that makes sense, I think, for new products, but even constant evaluation, that Kanban mentality of always seeking to improve. Ask those
Okay.
stakeholders. Well, what happens if this goes? Who's using it? What is their experience? Why does that matter?
Yeah.
It's it again. I don't think it has to be big. I think we could take a particular smaller area and just focus on that, and maybe that's sufficient. Incremental change, that incremental improvement, right? You're not gonna boil the ocean all at once, right?
No, 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 no. Start small. Start small. 100%. Ben, thank you so
Absolutely.
much for your time. You've been very generous,
You are most
and I
welcome.
really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you
And I
very
look
much.
forward
I've
to the next
thoroughly
time.
enjoyed our time together, sir. I really have. Yes, sir. I look forward to it.